Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and welcome to Cireco Summit 2021. My name is Perttu Ketola. I'm the founder and chairman at Cireco Finland. Today we have very interesting topics, great panelists with good presentations, and we are going to speak about collaboration and building ecosystems. My favorite topics, actually. I love networking, and it's a crucial part when we are trying to move from linear economy to circular economy. And when we are speeding the transition, we need to stand tall together and do the collaboration. And today's host is Kasmir Jolma from Jolma Architects. Very much welcome.
Thank you, Perttu. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm honored to host the seminar today. So my name is Kasmir Jolma, and I'm a Tampere-based architect specializing in urban design. And now, good morning to everyone here in the live audience and to everyone following the event remotely. To show support for our remote audience, let's give a round of applause for everyone following us from home or work. I'm really excited about the great panelists today. We have a really diverse and talented set of people here to discuss about the role of ecosystems and cross-industry collaboration in the transition towards circular economy. First, we will have introduction presentations by our panelists, and after that we will have the panel discussion, and after the panel we have a chance for networking. We will reserve questions for the panelists to the panel discussion, so if you have any questions during the presentation, put them down and you can ask them during the panel. But now it's time to move on to the first introduction. Jukka Viitanen works as the Environmental Manager of NRC Group Finland and Head of Sustainability at NRC Group ASA since June 2020. NRC Group is a leading infrastructure company in the Nordics with nearly 2,000 professionals. Before NRC Group, Jukka Viitanen has worked within the construction industry throughout his career for over 16 years in various roles and with a variety of duties, many of them including business development and environmental aspects. Over the last 5 years or so, Jukka has been focusing more on wider sustainability aspects on different projects. Please join me in welcoming Jukka Viitanen.
Okay, good morning and thank you so much, Cireco, for inviting me into this summit. It's a great pleasure to be here and see people live after a year and a half. So, today I'm going to talk to you about something that I call here the track towards a circular economy. I'm going to speak a lot about sustainability before I end up into circularity. And that's because I believe these two need to be integrated in the business as one and not as separate functions. So I believe that both sustainability and circular economy, they depend on each other, and they need to be an integral part of a company's business as usual before they really can succeed. But what is NRC Group? First I will speak a few words about the company itself, then maybe something in general about the sustainability work, what we do, and then finally I will get back to the circularity. So, or at least that's my plan. Let's see how it goes. So, NRC Group, we are a Nordic company. NRC stands for Nordic Railway Construction, and as Kasmir told, we have approximately 2,000 employees across the Nordic. And what we focus on is the railway infrastructure, constructing it and the maintenance of it. In Norway, we also have some other businesses as recycling and demolition business in addition to this. In Finland, we work with the railway business only. We construct and maintain it and produce some railway-specific materials. Light rail part has been growing rapidly recent years, and for example, Tampere tramway, the nice ratikka that we have here in Tampere, is something that we've been working on in the alliance for past years. The sustainability work that we do, it's not very old. The sustainability work in its form as it is today, it started approximately a year ago when I entered NRC under the title of Program Manager of Sustainability. So I kind of created this sustainability work that we do today. And what we have done after that, well, we have set some targets on climate and energy. And our biggest target is to reduce our carbon emissions by 30% by the end of this strategy period. For us, that is very ambitious. And also we are planning to be aligned with the EU and other global emission reduction targets. So that's what is the foundation of our sustainability work. And earlier I mentioned that I want to integrate our sustainability work in the business, and as part of that we have, for example, provided sustainability training for all our employees across the Nordic, and we have been able to train nearly a half of our employees during this year, which is really good. So, railways. Well, construction in general, that's pretty heavy stuff when it comes to emitting CO2. So we are the so-called 40% industry. We consume 40% of all the raw materials in the society, and we generate 40% of the CO2 emissions of the society. But what about railways then? Well, for the end user, the railway, it's really, really good and climate friendly. If you look at the diagram on the right that Sitra has done, it shows the footprint of different transport modes. And as you can see, when you ride your bicycle, that's the only shape of transportation that has lower carbon footprint than taking a train. Everything else has higher carbon footprint. Maybe walking has lower, but that's not a shape of transport in this sense. So in general, transport, they generate 22% of carbon footprint of an average Finn. And as said, bicycle is the only one that is more climate friendly. And nearly 1/3 of the land freight, the goods and materials that are transported across the country, they are transported on train. And that generates only 1% of the total emissions of land freight. So the 70% of the land freight that goes on car, on wheels, that generates 99% of the emissions of land freight. So quite obviously it is a climate-friendly solution. But have we really been able to utilize circular economy within railway infrastructure? Let's take a look at that first. I'm happy to see this picture, and you're actually the first ones who see that as well. This is based on a study that our wonderful trainee, who is here today, did last summer during her training period on NRC Group. So we took a look on how much materials we use when we construct 1 kilometer of single track railway. How much CO2 emissions do the products themselves generate? So, well, they generate 237 tons of CO2. But what do you do with 1 kilometer of single track railway? Not so much. So you need many other parts of railway as well. And for example, if you want to construct a railway from Tampere to Helsinki, that requires 150 kilometers of railway. So it does generate a lot more CO2. And this doesn't take into account the machine works, and it doesn't take in account the emissions that are generated when the foundation works of a railway are constructed. So it is only the top layer. So actually constructing a railway, it is pretty heavy when it comes to carbon footprint. So we need to focus on that, and to be able to create more climate-friendly ways of working, and circular economy is one answer to that, at least in my opinion. From there, we end up in my last slide. So the transition needed. Today, we are in this linear economy. We are living in it, unfortunately, so far. You can see the same picture on the left that was in my first slide. It is showing the bullet straight railway line, and you can see some clouds in the horizon. They are rising there, and that is actually quite well picturing the transition that we need and the change we need to do already today, because otherwise we will end up in the eye of the storm, which is, for example, the climate change. On the right, there's the circular economy. So we need to move there. This picture was provided by Brio. I stole it from their website, so thank you, Brio, for that. And that describes very well, I think many of us have played as a child with these wooden trains, and they go around and round and never end the end station. And that's how we need to approach, for example, the materials that we use when we construct railways as well. Today, we don't. There are so many materials that just go into waste because we don't know what to do with them. And well, one of the reasons is, of course, that we don't have the needed production chains to make new products out of the used ones. Very simple products, like, for example, the railway ballast that is the stone materials that the tracks lie on. There's no use for that, although that is one of the best quality stone materials that we use in the country. And that's, of course, a shame. We need to find some uses for that, and they are big volumes that we use annually. So we need a big transition, and we are on the track, I believe. Thank you.
Thank you, Jukka Viitanen. It was a really great presentation, especially the Brio reference was really nice. Let's move on to the second panelist introduction. Mika Cireco is the Technology and Concept Director at Honkajoki Ltd. Honkajoki is Finland's leading processor of animal pipe products involved in the manufacture and refining of animal pipe products into high-quality, clean and safe raw materials for customers in various industrial sectors. Mika has been involved with industrial systems, technological concepts, and business cases related to the circular economy since the beginning of his professional career, striving towards carbon neutrality, minimizing material loss from production, water footprint, and energy consumption and operation costs thereof. Mika believes that co-creation and the ability to understand synergies between different operations and stakeholders through networking and agile approach, as well as people and know-how, can be connected to add value in professional communities and business ecosystems, a key to success in the modern business environment. Please join me in welcoming Mika Cireco.
Thank you for the introductions. Thank you, Cireco and Harri, for invitation. I'm going to introduce you what we do, the company, and the new part of the company, where I actually come from. Honkajoki has been working with circular economy principles over 50 years already. That is a success story at such, and we got this year also recognition from Sitra when we entered the Sitra most interesting circular economy companies list. You can find some more information there on the list on Honkajoki. Recently, we have activated the operations of GMM Finland, which is a Honkajoki subsidiary that provides is a business partner for the Honkajoki Group, providing services that develop Honkajoki concept, the way of doing the circular business. And we also implemented in the Kirkkokallio Eco Park in Kankaanpää, a village of Honkajoki. There's an ecosystem of several companies that all benefit from each other when collaborating. It is creating both social and environmental impact, but also profit, better profit for all participants. You can find more information also from the QR codes and from online audience and here on site in the wonderful Tehdassaari premises. I would like to note that an ecosystem as such, this is a local ecosystem of companies there, but the business ecosystem spreads wider. It's a regional, national, and global when you think of the customers. From one end, the services for the customers providing the raw materials, and then the customers using it to improve their sustainability, for example, for the products. This leads us to a picture or illustration as we work now in animal by-product processing. The similar principles would apply for plant-based byproducts, but it is all about the business case. So first of all, you need some scale of volume to operate in an industrial scale. We, Honkajoki Group, have owners of both having 50%, which are the largest food industry companies in Finland, Atria and HK Scan. So it's a natural connection for the raw material side products from the meat industry. Here we need to say that the byproducts consist of those parts of the food processing that do not end into the supply chain to the markets, to the wholesale. So the products we do not eat or we wish not to eat. And that also depending on the market where we are. In Asia, people consume different portion and parts than in Europe, in the US, and so on. But this is a part where byproducts that is processed in rendering plants. That's the core business in Honkajoki. And then the ecosystem is built around it. So we can see that if we think about that, depending on the animal, there's 1/3 or 50% of the meat ends up in our plates. But then there's 40 to almost 50% which can be processed to add value. It's not wasted, so we prevent waste and then add value to the product. So basically this operation is not dependable on the gate feeds. We have only a fraction, less than 10% of the raw material stream that we need to put a gate fee on, but otherwise it's all operating on the value of the products. So in a principle, we are quite a different circular economy operator in the industrial scene. The Honkajoki concept is the way how we operate, how we have developed it in 50 years, how we implement it in the Kirkkokallio Eco Park, and where we continuously improve it to meet the modern requirements and the business goals. But it's also been created a possibility, because as most of you might not know, that the meat consumption is increasing globally. So there's a clear trend for proteins used from meat, but only in few markets like EU, the US, and some others, the byproduct processing is carried out sustainably. And Honkajoki has noticed a business opportunity here to bring this knowledge and the business to those market areas. So kind of change that, or make the transition more prompt, instead of taking small steps on a longer trail, but to take the giant leap to a certain level already. And that requires that you have know-how, you have experience, and you can build a business case. The concept is not processing or not the raw materials, it's kind of looking at the business case from the feasibility side. Then you can involve private operators and other operators from a national level. You need the regulations, but you also need the business case there to support the transition. So it's flexible, it's adaptable to each case, depending on the raw materials and logistics and so on, because this is the core supply chain where you have the abattoirs, the slaughterhouses, the farms, the meat cutting plants. Then you have ecosystem related to the logistics, the processing, the auxiliary processes, then the end products. They all need to be reviewed from the market perspective. And it's been around for many years that data is gold. So how do you manage this is by using the data, collecting it, building a system where you have all the necessary data. You can connect it, you can help to provide a perspective that helps the business, the people in charge to make the right decisions, but also on an operative level. In an ecosystem like this, there's so many stakeholders and operations that humans cannot do it without machine intelligence. So basically, we have created also a product that is available for Honkajoki, but also customers around the world that helps in this. We call it augmented intelligence because it's always the combination of human and then the data processing. So, thank you. Hope this introduced you the business what we are in.
Thank you, Mika Cireco. Now it's time for the third panelist introduction. Michael Hanf is the executive partner and CEO at Taival. Taival is a new type of advisory company working at the intersection of strategy, data and technology, ecosystems and circular economy. With agile methods and co-creation at its core, Taival helps customers identify, plan and execute initiatives that drive real sustainable success. With more than 20 years in business and technology consulting, Michael has deep experience in helping companies deliver and navigate disruptive change. Please join me in welcoming Michael Hanf.
Thank you. Thanks, Casimir. Thanks, Cireco, for inviting me. And as the speaker said before, it's great to see people face to face again in these events. It's different than the virtual events. I had to dress up, not only the upper part, but my whole body in the morning. So it's nice to actually be here today. I will briefly introduce what we do at Taival, but I thought to leave you with two ideas or two things that we have seen in the projects we've been doing. So briefly about myself, I'm originally from Germany, been here in Finland now for 18 years. Used to work for a company called Accenture in technology and business strategy, and 5 years ago basically co-founded with 3 friends / former colleagues Taival as basically a strategy advisory. What we saw is that strategy and the way strategy was approached by companies was not really reflecting what the world needed. It was very inwards directed, very backwards looking, very financially driven. And we said there has to be a better way of doing strategy. There has to be a better way for companies to address the strategic challenges that we're seeing as society, but also as companies and as individuals. And that's when we started Taival, basically as a strategy advisory that reinvents the way strategy is done. We're working on the intersection between data-enabled businesses, ecosystems, and circular economy, sustainability, in the context of strategy development and strategy execution. So what that means is we're helping our customers to understand what these strategic game changers mean for them and how they could address them in the context of their business, not only from a compliance point of view, but as the previous speaker said, also from a business point of view. How do you create new business models? How do you create new revenue out of these strategic game changers? What I would like to do is leave you with basically 2 ideas also for the panel discussion later on. And they're drawn right off the projects that we've been working on. So first of all, if we talk about ecosystems, what does an ecosystem mean even? So I mean, we borrowed the term ecosystem out of nature, where different parts of nature work together seamlessly to create value for all the parts of the ecosystem. But what does that term actually mean? So I think it's now a year ago, 2 years ago, Smart and Clean Foundation. So the Circular Economy and Sustainability Foundation of the city of Helsinki, not existent anymore because they were there only for a specific part of time, approached us and said, we want to understand how the plastics ecosystem works and how can we accelerate and improve plastic circularity in the capital region and in Lahti. So as a first step, we said, okay, so what is that ecosystem? Who are the players in that ecosystem? Who needs to basically play together here? And how do we make sure that they actually do play together? Because different players have different objectives. And this is what we came up with. This is basically on a high level, the ecosystem operating model for plastic circulation. And as you see, there's a lot of different players from the ecosystem development side, where you have anchor companies, very often large companies that basically bring forward the idea, finance the idea to a large extent. You then have startups that are very agile, that bring new ideas, innovation into the ecosystem. But then you have also accelerators and private funding and researchers in that space that basically continuously remodel and reinvent the ecosystem and brings it forward. On the other side, you have the ecosystem operations. And if you think about plastics, you basically have the virgin raw materials, you have then the raw material production, you have the production of plastics, and plastic material or products, and then you basically need to close the circle. You have recycling, chemical recycling of plastics, and then that goes back into the raw material. So that's the core of the ecosystem. But what we also found is that around that, there's a lot of other players. Like the regulatory environment needs to be in place. So there needs to be the right legal requirements, what EU is doing at the moment in the area of circularity, the right to repair, all of these things. But also on a municipality and city level, there needs to be the right framework. Then you need to have the education, the awareness of companies, the awareness of individuals, of citizens, but also the awareness of the workforce. So that's why we're seeing Aalto taking a leading role in driving education in the circular economy space. That's why cities and companies take a leading role in educating their employees and the citizens in that field. And then you basically need someone to orchestrate that, to bring all of that together and make sure all of this aligns. This is true for the plastics ecosystems, as we saw in this project. A little bit later, we did a similar project for, back then they were called Traffic Management Finland, now they're called FinTraffic. So they're responsible for the traffic all over Finland, like air traffic, rail traffic, buses, all of that. And they also said, so how do we enable a model like mobility as a service? How do we bring all of these different players all over Finland, potentially even all over Europe, together? And what we found is the different players have very different objectives. Their objectives are not necessarily aligned. They move into different directions. So the orchestrator takes a very active role in bringing all of this together. And basically aligned with the topic today, not all of these players come out of the same industry. They don't come out of the same region. They come from very different backgrounds, very different industries, and need to learn to work together, need to learn to have the same terminology, have the same approaches, have the same way of working. So if you think about different industries, you think about different terminologies, different things they do, different approaches that they have to specific topics. So you need to develop that in the context of an ecosystem, which makes the ecosystem so interesting, but also so challenging to put together, because one of the key ingredients is to take the interest of your ecosystem into consideration as much as the interest of your own company or your own organization in that context. And most of the organizations today, specifically companies, are not built in that way. They're not necessarily set up in a way that they can work as an ecosystem. As for years we have told people like, yeah, work within the company, keep things secret, don't talk to others because they might be competition, not now, but in the future. And all of a sudden we go over and we say, yeah, just talk to everyone. Like everyone is our friend and we're now all an ecosystem and we all have the same ideas. And that takes time, that takes education, that takes things to take forward. Related to that, I quickly wanted to touch the role of the orchestrator in a little bit more detail, because that is one of the key ingredients. And there is a very interesting study about Dutch regions, actually, conducted that brings together the different elements, also the element of the public players in this context. And I won't be boring you with reading through all of this. You can find the study online. The whole white paper is available there. But this is basically to show that ecosystems very seldomly develop naturally. So ecosystems in nature develop naturally because there's different parts of nature depending on others and getting value from the other side. But as our organization and our companies and our organizations are built up, these ecosystems don't necessarily form naturally. And that's why there's such an important role to have these orchestrators, to have these facilitators that bring together these ecosystems. And that can be, as I said, cities, municipalities, public players in that field, but that can also be companies. We're currently working with a logistics company in Central Europe, and they're actually specifically looking to develop business models, completely new business areas around orchestrating the circular economy, bringing together these different players, be it in rental models, be it in refurbished models, be it in recycling scenarios, and they see that they have a new role there as an orchestrator. So also companies can take that orchestrator role. And this is very critical in order to make ecosystems work, specifically if you go across industries, if you go across geographies, where companies are not necessarily used to work with each other, talk with each other, and have the same objectives and goals. So I wanted to leave you with these ideas, and I hope we can discuss them then later with the esteemed panel and with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I really liked how you explained these very complex ideas like ecosystems in a really structured and clear way. But now it's time for the last panelist introduction. Karoliina Tuukkanen works for the Verte Ltd, a company responsible of the Eco3 circular economic area. Karoliina has her background in environmental policy, and she has been responsible of developing circular economy solutions for new urban areas for the city of Tampere. In the new Pirkka-Circ project, owned by Verte Ltd, Karoliina focuses on creating a model for a regional platform for circular economy. She is especially interested in how the public sector can accelerate new circular economy business opportunities for companies. Please join me in welcoming Karoliina Tukkonen.
Right, so thank you so much, and thank you esteemed panelists, and thank you all of you, and thank you to Cireco for inviting me. So indeed, I am Karoliina, and I am the project manager for Pirkka-Circ project, which is a new project started about a month ago, so I'm very new. And it's owned by the company Verte, which is actually a City of the Nokia-owned company that also operates, as said, the area, circular industry area of Eco3. Now, I was asked to talk about the Eco3 area, but as I am a bit of a rebel, I will not do that. I will mention it and I will showcase that as well, but I also sort of wanted to talk to you about this project, and more than the project, actually introduce the idea of regional thinking to circular economy transformation. So that's what I'm going to do today. So what we're doing at the moment in Verte, and especially in this project that I'm running at the moment, we're trying to figure out whether regional models and regional thinking could be the right level to pushing circular economy forward. So our proposition at the moment is that regional scale actually might be the proper scale to think about circular economy, especially in some of the cases. But I'm open to being wrong. So let's see how I feel about this in a year when we finish this project. And actually, what you see on the screen now is our value proposition for the project and for the whole regional thinking at the moment, but this is also very initial. So it might change as we go through the project development and as we talk to different kind of people. So this is our sort of starting point for conversation at the moment, and we wanted to bring the value proposition towards at the beginning so that we can then have the conversation and see whether we need to change it or completely delete it and think of something else. But this is it at the moment. So a few words about why we think that regional level might be the right level or the right scale of development of circular economy. We sort of think that circular economy and pushing a transition from linear to circular is a large-scale problem or a large-scale issue. And then that sort of says that we need then large-scale problem solving as well. And that cannot, in our opinion, be done individually. So an individual city or an individual company or an individual person cannot do it on their own, but we need cooperation, and that's the key in solving these like large issues that we're dealing with circular economy and indeed other environmental issues as well. And our initial thinking is that material flows and themes are wider than one city, but they might be smaller than one country. So then the regional level might be the perfect level for thinking about it, but let's see. So this is the initial proposition at the moment. And then why we talk about platforms, I was actually really happy to hear what Michael said, because we have a very similar thinking with you and probably actually take it from the similar sources as you do. But we think the platform might be the perfect model for this kind of co-creation and co-development of these really, really big issues and big themes. So what's the purpose of a regional platform? What are we sort of intending to do at the moment? At the moment, we're sort of mapping out different benefits of developing circular economy in the regional context. And then we wanted to put this all out there as soon as possible and start a conversation with all of you guys. And we will continue this conversation throughout the whole project. So this is just the beginning. And our sort of modus operandi, or our way of working, is that first we map out everything that's been done, every studies and everything that's been done, because we do not want to reinvent the wheel. And this is what we're doing at the moment with my esteemed colleague Tommi Halonen, who is with me in this project. And then sort of the next step in the project and in the development is to figure out the architecture for the platform. Who needs to be involved, how and why? And sort of what kind of actors need to be involved so that we can promote circular economy. And as I said, the leap from circular to linear is quite a big leap. So that's why we sort of think that we need a lot of consensus building. And this consensus building is best done in platforms. And especially we need a very, very strong ownership and then facilitation in this platform, in our opinion. We hear quite often that circular economy brings a lot of business opportunities, and we agree. But then on the other hand, there's very little tangible, large-scale examples of this yet. So we think that maybe a platform would be the proper way of revealing this potential that the circular economy offers to us, to companies, to municipalities, and to different actors. And we want to be as operative as possible. So this is not a digital platform that we're sort of building at the moment. It's a very tangible platform. And we think about data quite a lot. Obviously, that's a very important theme for us, but only when it serves concrete aims. So only in that case. And then the orchestrator. This was actually what made me really happy about Michael's speech, because we've actually deemed the orchestrator one of the most important things in the platform. It's huge, the meaning of an orchestrator. And I like this comparison that was actually from the Smart and Clean Foundation, that an orchestrator is like the orchestra conductor, which brings all the different sort of instruments together to form music. I really like that idea. And we actually think that the orchestrators need to be people, and they need to have their own contacts, and they need to be able to connect with different actors who have different operational logics, and they need to be able to interpret those aims and logics and bring those people together. And we do think that people act as the best filters and matchmakers for this kind of operations. So, we have a couple of core themes for the platform at the moment. Now, these are not our ideas. These are something that actually come from studies already done in the area of Pirkanmaa and in Finland. But these are the kind of things that we're looking at the moment. So obviously, industrial symbiosis is really important for the area of Pirkanmaa. And then we look at renewable energy as well, but only those kind of outside of the box ideas, because we do think that renewable energy is something that has been developed quite far already. So I don't think we need to touch that so much in our development, because that's sort of been thought of quite well already. And then obviously infrastructure and house development are really important areas, because that's where the material flows are, as we heard before. And then we wanted to put these circular economy services there as well, and smaller companies that offer these. And we're going to look at all of these sort of core themes, and we're going to look at how these need to be taken into account in the platform, and what we need to do to sort of bring these actors together in the regional level. And this is only the beginning, as I said. So when they're going to have a lot of sparring sessions and a lot of discussions with different actors that know about these themes, and see whether these are actually the themes that we end up with. So we don't know that yet either. And this is very material flow oriented, and we do think about circular economy quite a lot in the material flow way, but we don't want to stop there when we create this platform. So we want to go further from that kind of thinking. Now, I promised that I would talk to you a little bit about the Eco3 circular economy area as well, which is situated here in Nokia, and which is one of the prominent circular economy areas in Finland at the moment. It's a very good example of one sort of municipal actor and how they have created a way of thinking about circular economy, and especially together with businesses. And I think that this is a good model to be scaled up to regional level. And I think that many of the things that they've already developed here, we can use directly in the development of the platform. And I would sort of like to raise the role of the public sector as enabler for market creation. This is something that we don't, I think, talk about enough, but we think that the role of the cities and municipalities is actually huge in creating market opportunities for circular economy. So this is our initial proposition. And this is my final slide, basically. This is a material flow sort of chart from the city of Nokia. And I wanted to show you this because it's actually a very good description of the material flows that are happening in the city of Nokia at the moment. But also, we don't want to, as I said, stop here. We want to sort of look at other things than material flows as well in the platform. We have to look at how to bring different kind of actors together, how to understand them, how to sort of develop skills and abilities. We have to look at branding and marketing. And we have to look at the framework or the way of working to push the CE transition together in this platform. So, then this is my final slide. This is my start for conversation, and I would like to see this platform operating and running in 5 years, so I am quite ambitious with my goals, but hopefully we will see that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karoliina. You make your case so convincingly that it's hard to disagree with you. And thank you for the great presentations. Now we can start the discussion with the audience about the role of ecosystems and cross-industry collaboration in the transition towards circular economy. So would anyone in the live audience or maybe in the remote audience have any questions for our panelists? Just be brave. Any question is okay. If you have any questions in the remote audience, you can send a message in Slack, and we have a contact person here who will then speak it out loud here in the live event. But is there anyone any questions yet? No? Okay. Well, in that case, oh, there is one. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Bernard Kusi from With regards to the platform that you just presented, you said it's not going to be based on digital web but the concrete. So in that case, how is it going to work? How are the players going to work in practical way?
I was sorry. I came really close to you. I was trying to have my mic so that the remote audience can also hear you. So it's not that I'm trying to harass you or anything. Okay, but did you get the question? So.
Yeah, so how is the platform going to work if we are not looking at digitalization? Well, we are actually looking at that as well, but for us the platform is a very, very physical platform with orchestrators and people who actually run it. And then the data is there, and it is actually written quite strongly in the project plan as well. But I think it's sort of the wrong way of looking at things if you first look at data and then you look at what you need the data to do. So we want to do it the other way around. And we want to see what are the connections and functionalities that we need to have in the platform so that we can actually push circular economy forward in the regional concept. And then see what kind of tangible things we need the data to actually bring forward. So that's why for us the platform is a very tangible physical platform, and then the data comes after we know what we need the data to do. Does this answer your question?
And maybe I can add to that, because based on our experience, I understand where the question is coming from, because everything is digital these days. Everything has been for the past 2 years even more digital than before. But what we realize is that a hybrid model, specifically in this space, is very important, because we're doing a systemic change, and systemic change is not easy. It requires trust. It requires everyone to understand what we're going through. And a lot of these interactions can be done digitally. And we've learned that over the past 2 years, that even more of these can be digital. But you need to complement them specifically on a regional level with face-to-face interactions in order to raise that trust level and also have difficult discussions. In one of the projects, we basically created a reference group. And what we saw is that you need to get competitors to the table. You need to get companies and organizations to the table that have different objectives, different targets. And you cannot fully facilitate all of this on a digital platform. And then we all learn differently. We all build our capabilities differently. So you need to have a hybrid model where digital has an important element, but also where other elements basically need to come in exactly as Karoliina has been discussing.
What he said.
Really well put, and this is a really interesting topic, so I think we could actually continue with it. So Mika, what is your point of view on this?
Yeah, I think all the presenters connect to the same issues. For kind of an industrial operation, it's also you need an orchestrator. Mm-hmm. Typically, it's the one that is in the core or has the muscles to kind of put the resources into this networking. It is also what we have found in the private operation. It's the trust that actually the orchestrator, let's say, according to our experience, needs to be from the players, the stakeholders, because it creates almost an unnecessary additional layer if it's an outsider or kind of a public operator as such, in our case at least, because it's the businesses are talking, and there's always the business perspective that you approach new players with. You'll present your challenges, you present your ideas of the opportunities related to kind of broadening the networking and the collaboration. So in that way, that is the kind of platform without the digitalization that you need. You can add digitalization to it, that you can meet with digital means people from another side of the world. But I would say that it still needs some kind of an personal contact to create that trust that then helps you to negotiate and find a solution in the last 2 years over the teams to bring the things forward.
What about Jukka?
Well, the panel gets boring because I totally agree what has been said earlier. So when it comes to digitalization, that we've done a giant leap within 10, 15 years. So now we gather a lot of data. We know everything, and all that is stored somewhere digitally. But maybe the problem is that we have too much data and we don't know where that is and how it could be utilized and how to use it. And also what Michael mentioned in his presentation, some things that were considered as business sensitive or secret like 5 years ago. Today we should be able to discuss them totally openly with open books and together with the ecosystems. Although we have done the giant leap in the digitalization, maybe our brains have not done the leap yet. So we have some work ahead in that sense.
That was a really good summary about the topic. That was a really good question. It opened up a really interesting discussion. So, would there be any other questions? Yeah, please continue.
Yeah, my question goes to the ecosystem that you just presented. You made a reference to the nature where the ecosystem grows naturally. But when you come to the human aspect, then it's not grow naturally. So may I know if there is any challenge as you have been in the system for so long, and if there's any challenge, what are the challenges, and if there is a success, what brought the success?
So just to summarize also for our remote audience, the question was about the relationship between the natural ecosystem and the man-made business ecosystems, and what kind of challenges there are in facilitating those ecosystems. If I got it right.
I used the reference for a reason, because I think in nature, if you look at ecosystems, they're never static. So ecosystems are continuously changing. On the other hand, we humans are not necessarily made for change. So you see that whenever you want to start a change initiative or something like that, you will hit resistance. It's easy for us humans to be in a steady state and just continue the way as we have always been, because that's the least energy we're using, that's the least effort we have, and that's how we move forward. And that's exactly, I think, where the key challenge lies in change. And Jukka mentioned it, the change from thinking inside the company to thinking outside and thinking in an ecosystem way. On the other side, I think one of the key challenges that we've seen is the fact that companies have been built to think about their own benefit. Companies want to optimize their own benefit. And in an ecosystem, if you follow an ecosystem, that's not always the case. You might end up in a sub-optimization where both or 3 or 4 parties will survive and will thrive, but are not doing as good as they would be otherwise. There's this example, I don't even know what animal it is, but a little bird that cleans the teeth of a, I think it's a lion or something like that, and the lion will not eat the bird because it works. So the lion gets something, he might get something to eat for once, but that would ruin the balance. And I think we're more still going for the direction of like, okay, let me go for the quick win, and I don't care about what's happening tomorrow, who will clean my teeth tomorrow, but at least I have something to eat today. And I think that is a huge mindset shift that we have to make. And that's true from my observation, both on a company, but also on an individual level. And if we want to drive this systemic change that Carolina was alluding to, but also Mika and Jukka were pointing out, we have to change these behavioral patterns. And I had a very interesting discussion around that yesterday, where it was about mindset or skill set, and where we discussed about the need or the fact that the mindset is so much more important than the skill set, specifically when it comes to these changes. And before the event, we talked about the fact that we started working in this area 5 years ago, and we started an event called Digitally Circular. And we've seen a tremendous change in how people think, how companies think. When we started the event series, it was really people that focused on the topic, researchers and people that were really deeply in the topic. Nowadays, you get business leaders, you get C-level people, and really interested in the topic. And that's the mindset change we all have to drive. Because if we drive that, and if the majority of people start thinking in this way, start believing in this, start driving companies, start driving investments, then we will see this systemic change happening. But that takes all of us to really drive that mindset change. And I think that's the biggest challenge, but that's also the biggest opportunity we have at the same time. And now I shut up and let others speak, sorry.
Yeah, I want to sort of raise the question of ownership as well, because Michael, you talked about it, and Mika, you talked about it, and it's always the discussion between whether a larger ecosystem or platform should have a private ownership or a public ownership. And I think it actually complements this sort of question, your question, and this that you presented quite well, that you have to think about that. Who is the best owner for what you're thinking of? Because in some cases it is true that that companies sort of obviously have their own interest at mind. So then if you have a really large ecosystem or a really large platform, it might be good if the owner is public. But then does it have to be a municipality, or can it be a publicly owned company, which would make it a little bit more flexible? This is something that we actually think about quite a lot now. My initial thinking is that it should be public ownership, but I might be wrong, so let's see in a year.
Mika.
Yeah, I think both are needed, because if I look at Eco3, how I see it, it's also kind of an well, not an empty space, but it's a space where you kind of gather companies that you'll try to find that fits in, let's say, the piece of the carpet fits, that it looks like a functioning object or case. But it's the, I think it kind of comes back to the business case. So in a public space, it's a business case to kind of facilitate operations in a piece of real estate, for example, kind of an added value from bringing those companies together, all the infrastructure that is, the physical infrastructure is needed and so on. But in an industrial operations, it's might kind of, it starts from a business thought that it builds on. So there, I think it's then more natural that it is business-owned orchestrating. But there you also need a public support, because it's well, maybe there you'll see my consulting background, but it starts from the kind of aerial planning. So you'll have to have a space for your operations to build a local ecosystem, if that's the case. But there are even ecosystems that are kind of more abstract, not depending on the physical closeness, so to say. So it is a business case.
How about Jukka?
Yes, very interesting. About the ownership, I don't know what to think about that actually, because we are in this kind of a disruptive phase at the moment. We know that in the capitalistic system, the public ownership is not the most efficient way of handling things or creating value for the money that we have. But capitalism hasn't existed always, so are we going back somewhere, or are we going to enter into a new phase of or some kind of an era? I don't know. But at least at the moment, it looks like, in my head, that the most efficient way is not the public ownership, but the private ownership. It does need some support or kick from the public ownership to get over the transition and the disruptive phase.
Mm-hmm. And there I see also a kind of linkage to the nature that the ecosystem, it finds kind of a niche there where some species thrive and add value to the ecosystem. But it's the same, that you have the framework, and then the businesses, through regulation or the market case, they kind of they go forward according to their initiatives. What is there to win? Mm-hmm.
And I think that is where I like the idea of the platform, because that bypasses the question about ownership a little bit, because you can create the platform and then let others use that platform, work within that framework, take the resources that they need from the platform, but not guide it too much, not own the whole ecosystem, but create a flourishing ground for the ecosystem, like you would do in an aquarium, where you want to build an ecosystem. You're not basically doing everything there, but you're creating that future soil in order for the ecosystem to grow. And I think that is the way it will go, where the platform is created, as you said, Mika, with a physical space, like an industry park or something like that, where you give the physical space to the ecosystem, with giving platforms for the ecosystem to discuss, to flourish, where you create the legal, the regulatory framework around that, so that these things can happen. And that's what we found in the plastics ecosystem project, that you need to make sure that the guardrails, that the framework, that the platform is there. And then you can let players play, but you also need to make sure that it goes into the right direction, because there are some societal targets that we have that might not always map with the targets of the company. So there's also, and that's why I said an ecosystem is always in flux, is always changing. That's what we need to keep in mind. Ecosystems cannot be steady. They cannot just, you cannot say like, oh, now we set up the ecosystem and now we're happy ever after. The ecosystem will change. There's new startups coming in. There's new regulation coming in. There's new research coming in. There's new findings coming in about what drives CO2, what drives climate change, and all of that we have to take together, and that creates the ever-living, ever-changing ecosystem that we need to be looking at. And back to the point I made earlier, I mean, change is difficult for us humans, and if you think about a setup that is continuously changing, that can be quite scary. That is something that we need to wrap our heads around and really start to think differently in that approach.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of you, actually. This is a bit boring panel discussion. Yes, you're right. But I sort of still want to come back to that sort of public ownership and public, like the role of cities and municipalities, because I am a bit of a rebel, and this is something quite new for cities and might not go down that well in cities. But I actually think that we would need to be ready to change the role of cities as well. And cities need to understand their own role in pushing market creation and pushing markets forward, because they don't at the moment. This is my assumption, and this is quite a bold assumption, especially because I still work for a city as well. But I do think that we need to change that understanding idea as well, that cities actually have to realize that they have a really strong role also in market creation. And this is not something that we're used to thinking, and this is true that in a capitalistic sort of system, it's usually thought of that public sector isn't the best one to push like things forward. But if we look at circular economy, I think we need to change that thinking in cities as well. Not an easy thing to do, but I still think we need to do it.
Really great. This is starting to get, yes?
Yeah, I have to point out one thing, that it's always kind of that there are people in the front line and the first wave, and then followers and latecomers and so on. But that is how we were talking about transition. So I think this kind of platforms, like you mentioned, that digitally circular, that is something that you it needs time, but it then changes people's thinking. Just to point out that when moving things drastically, changing, making a change, you need to prepare the human mind, and there you need events like this, for example.
Definitely, that's a good point. Let's continue. There's another question. Thank you. Well, I can come close to you, so maybe it's good for the remote audience. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Taival. I'm a consultant and entrepreneur, and thank you for a great presentation today. It made me rethink these things, and I'd like to share one idea and then present the question to the company representatives. So I think very often when we talk about going circular, it seems like single businesses should become circular themselves, like alone, that they should develop a business model that's circular and uses all the materials that it has or its own side flows and so on. So very often we have this image in our head that it should be done alone and the company should be circular, but it can be that it's not possible, and the ecosystem is circular and the businesses are linear within. So related to this, I'd like to ask you who would be your key partners in, let's say, 10 years, 2030, to become circular with, so not your company alone, but what kind of partners could you have in 10 years to become circular? Be creative, this is a tough question maybe now, but to awake some ideas. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Who would like to start?
I mean, I can maybe, we as a company, for us, it's not a problem to be circular because we're a service company, and we're investing into CO2, plastics neutrality, and things like that. But I think your question is spot on, and one of the things I say quite frequently in the digitally circular events is that, in my opinion, no company can be circular by themselves. That's just impossible. To do that, because that would mean you use your own side streams, you use your own waste again in your production. That would mean you are a huge company that does a million things, and we've seen that, but it's very seldom. So there will always be other companies you need to work with, and in the ecosystem, it's even, as I showed earlier, it's even broader than that. It's not necessarily only the company up or downstream that you need to think about, but it's really the overarching ecosystem. And what we noticed, for example, in the plastics ecosystem, the going in hypothesis was like, yeah, if we ramp up recycling in the capital region, that will increase circularity in the plastics ecosystem. What we found out, because after this model, we did a data model where we looked at the material streams, and what turned out to be the bottleneck is not the recycling. What turned out to be the bottleneck is the usage of recycled plastics, because there are not enough companies that are at this point in time able and ready to use recycled plastics. So if you think about a company that does plastic buckets, for example, for them a key problem to be circular is, if my plastic bucket is recycled, there's no one taking that plastic anymore, and it will end up in re-incineration, in energy creation, because no one is buying the recycled plastic, because downstream there's no one taking that. So you really need to think systemic, and you really need to think about the whole setup in that. So it's a really good question.
And in a sense, you cannot do it alone, because it is kind of a challenge, or what you need to solve is that in order to make a good recycled product, or a product from a recycled material, you need to have it designed for recycling. So then you kind of need to be in the sources to collaborate and find a way that how can we do this. Because in plastics, there are not a single plastics that some of the audience might give a lecture to, but it's a mixture which you get it from the recycling, so that plays also a role. For your question, I think there are some megatrends or let's say at least current issues related to the energy, for example. So we are striving to get carbon neutral and energy what we used in our production. So basically getting raw material, separating the flows to liquid and dry, and drying the final product. So it requires energy. So it really plays an important role. How do we do this? And I'll suspect that there we have looking for good partners to provide us solutions there to transition from fossil fuels to another kind of fuels.
Yes, thank you. Very good and interesting question that we also think. So who are the partners in 10 years for us? Basically, today, everything we do is based on what our customer says that we need to do. So if our customer says that we need a new track from Tampere to Helsinki and you are going to build it, then we do it. And we do it as the customer says, without thinking anything further. But when we bring circularity into this, because we have to, that's what we need to do. Because not only because of the climate change, but also because of the scarcity of the materials that we are used to working with. The virgin raw materials, they do not exist endlessly. So we need to change our ways of behavior. So who are they, the partners in 10 years? I think they don't exist today, at least for us. Because, for example, the very simple material that I mentioned in my presentation, the railway ballast, high quality stone material, very simple product that could be used in many other purposes as well. It's not used. It's just deposited somewhere only to get rid of the old material at the end of its life cycle. No one's interested in it on how to use it today. I know that in Gothenburg there is one initiative driven by City of Gothenburg, so maybe public ownership is actually needed in this as well. And they are looking for the possibilities of using that product for some other purposes when it comes to the end of the life cycle in the use of railway ballast. So many partners don't exist yet, but they will soon be born, I think.
Great. What about Karoliina? Would you have a point of view on this?
Who isn't our partner? I think for us the stakeholders are quite many, let's put it that way, because we look at platforms. So obviously we want companies involved. That's very important for us. But then the other stakeholder group, especially for us, is municipalities. And to get not just the large ones who already know what they're doing, but the smaller ones as well, and offering something for them as well. But then also research, because I don't think you can sort of highlight the role of research enough, especially when you're building something new. You have to have that side as well. It can't be just companies and municipalities, because we need that new value creation from information as well. So basically the whole world, I suppose, because then we need the end users as well. But for us, companies, municipalities, and then the research are the main three groups.
And maybe the non-profit organizations as well.
Maybe those as well, yes.
Michael.
Yeah, and I think Jukka made a very, very important point. I mean, if you look at the construction industry, It's a very interesting industry. As buildings are built, they're torn down, material is basically thrown away. The legislative frame at the moment allows only limited reuse of these construction materials. So you have one partner with the legislation creation there. Then you have other areas like we talked about plastics. Chemical recycling for plastics is a huge problem at the moment. There's by far not enough capacity for that. Huge opportunities for startups and as we talked about, new companies that are not there at the moment. So there are partners in that ecosystem that come, yes, from the company side, but you need to make sure that all of these play together, that the legislation supports it, that it keeps up with the latest developments, with what startups are doing. You need the startups that bring completely new ideas. You need the platforms that enable startups to develop these ideas and bring these ideas forward. And then you need anchor companies that are willing to take that step forward and say like, yeah, you know, we're willing to do something differently. We're willing to take that step forward. And I'm convinced we saw, and I've been mentioning that in many of the discussions I had, 10 years ago or something, the whole discussion on ethics and bribery and all of that came up. Before that, not many people thought about that in an RFP process or in a big tender process. And all of a sudden, it was in each and every single tender. There was a paragraph that companies need to comply with regulation around this. And I think we will see something very similar in this space. As companies announce their CO2 targets, as companies are taking a step forward, we will see more and more demand for that up and down the value chain, as I said, there will be demand for these. And companies that are not even considering it today will need to show what's my CO2 balance, how am I contributing with my footprint, but also my handprint in solving the problems. And that will create completely new partnerships and models that we cannot even imagine today. So.
And this is actually already partially coming from the EU taxonomy.
Yes,
so it's already
absolutely,
there. Yeah,
absolutely,
so
yes.
we will see it.
Yes.
Thank you for the great discussion. I think we have actually touched on the most important topics for today. We have talked about ecosystems, we have talked about collaboration, we have talked about the transition, and obviously circular economy. So obviously this is such an interesting topic that we could continue on this for the whole day. But unfortunately, we need to wrap up the discussion soon. So now let's have a round of closing statements from each of our speakers. So what is your key takeaway from the discussion today? And let's start from Jukka.
Yes, thank you. Easy to start with the wrap-up. Sorry, key takeaways. So first of all, mentioned the startups that will change the market and how things happen today. Yes, we are today here invited by one startup, the Cireco company. Otherwise, we wouldn't be discussing this topic here if it didn't exist. Mm-hmm. So they are certainly needed because they will change the market and they will change the mindset and they will disrupt the market. So in 10 years, probably we will be invited or not. Maybe some other people will be invited into a discussion like this somewhere else. Talking topics that have been developed from only ecosystems and collaboration that is needed, because that will happen, it will come, I'm sure of that. And also as the new generation enters into the working market, for example, they have totally new thoughts and ideas about how things should actually go in this world, and they will also change it. I'm sure of that.
Great, new generation. That's a good,
yes.
Good closing statement. About Mika.
Yeah, it's been interesting discussion and like-minded, but that's a good thing in a way too, that we kind of have a clear roadmap how things go forward and transition. Let me say that maybe as a wrap-up on a public sector point of view, also one positive item that seldom is announced that the role of EU, for example, in our business, is that that creates the regulative norms and what we have in IPPC, best available technology documentation, which also is applied, or there's a chapter for our industry operations too. So that is something what we can rely upon, and as we try to make growth in our business to bring these circular economy solutions and sustainability to other markets, that we have this kind of backbone of EU norms that show how this is done and how it's regulated. And actually, many of the markets that we have on our focus, they use that as a guideline because they don't have their own at the moment. So let's not forget that this is also supporting the business of circular economy.
That's a really good point. So norms are also needed. Then Michael.
Yeah, I think as Mika said, like-minded people. So it was a easy discussion. At the same time, I think what it reinforced is that there is a need to have different parties, different solutions, different players come together, look at new ways of thinking about things. And it's great to see that we're making progress. As I mentioned, we started working in this area 5 years ago and started with the Digitally Circular event. And since then, we've come a long way. We still have a long way to go, definitely, to address the climate crisis, to address the challenges that we have in front of us. But we've come a long way, and we see companies step up. We've just, I think it was yesterday, the US and China have announced that they will be working together on the topic. Something that is a milestone, as they are the two biggest polluters in the world. So we see progress, and I think that is, again, one of the key takeaways. We need to work with the different players. We need to raise awareness. We need to make sure that companies, public players, all the different players in the ecosystem need to play together and work towards a joint target. With orchestration, without orchestration, with orchestration out of the public field. To be very honest, I think, I was about to say I don't care, but I care. But it will be different from one case to the other. So in some cases, it makes perfect sense for a public player to take the lead role and take things forward and create a new market. In other cases, it's perfectly fine and okay for a company to take the lead role and drive new circular business models, enable new circular business models. But I think we all need to find a pragmatic way and really make sure that we change our mindset and that we calibrate our way of operating, thinking about business, thinking about how we operate. I think that is one of the key takeaways for me, and it's good to see that we're doing that on very many different levels.
Thank you.
Okay, so what they said. But yeah, I came to this sort of event, which was really interesting, by the way, so thank you, everybody, with the mindset that the wisdom doesn't lie with us, and I completely agree still. So it lies with everybody else. And it's always nice to sort of share ideas with like-minded, and it also helps to sort of enforce a certain kind of thinking. But I do agree that we also need to have discussions with people who don't agree with us, because I think that's where we sort of find the sweet spots, or where we are right and where we still need to develop our thinking. And that's something that we sort of try to do in this project as well, is to find the sweet spots in where regional thinking could actually offer added value to the transition towards circular economy. And this was really interesting for me, and I love speaking with like-minded people because it gives me the strength that I'm actually doing something that's worthwhile. But then going forward, I would also love to hear other opinions as well, so I welcome critique.
Thank you. This was a great motivational discussion for everyone. So with these statements, it's a good time to finish the discussion now. And let's give one more round of applause to our great speakers. And now it's time to move on to the networking event. Thank you.
Go.
Good.